well water.
Okay.
My first question for you is, could what happened in Flint happen in Jackson?
It could, but to protect against that, we are very careful about how we treat our water. We treat it a certain way that the inside of our lead pipes have a thin coating of calcium that doesn't allow the water to actually touch the pipe, so that protects the water. So as long as we monitor that appropriately, we should not have an issue.
Cool. Do we have any water rights issues in Jackson?
We do not. Right now, there is talk about water rights and how much you can draw out of the ground. We draw our water from an underground aquifer, and there's a lot of water down there, so it's not an issue. There has been talks, and I believe out west where they have bigger issues and it's dry, they have desert, they have a harder time getting water. I think there is more impact out there, and Michigan has discussed creating laws limiting how much water you can draw out of underground aquifers, but that has not been put into place yet.
Has there been talk on water rights about draining some of the Great Lakes and going to transfer it over to the California drought?
There has, and actually there is a compact of the Great Lakes states that this region has a group that meets and they regulate where the Great Lakes water can go. And actually there's an interesting case that's been in the news recently about a small town in Wisconsin that is just outside of the Great Lakes basin, and they would like to use Lake Michigan water for their drinking supply, but they're not in the group that can use the water. So it's quite an interesting discussion to hear them requesting water and being told, so far they're being told no, they cannot.
What happens if you don't pay your water bill?
Sadly, then we go to that individual home and we shut the water off at the street, so they don't get any more water until they pay their bill.
In that case, can any water be illegally transferred again, and how could you stop that?
Actually, that has happened. That's a very good question. Some people figure out how to build a wrench that you can use to turn the valve off and on. And if we go shut it off, they've been known to put their own wrench on and turn it back on. In one instance, we had someone hook up a garden hose to the house next door and run it over to their house and supply themselves water that way. So there are ways to get around it.
On your opinion, is water a human right or a commodity?
That's a tough question. It's, in my opinion, it's a commodity. We take it for granted in this country that it's just there when you turn the tap on. If you go to some underdeveloped countries, they don't have clean drinking water. They're lucky if they have water at all. A lot of countries, they have to hand dig down to get to the water, a hand dug well where they still dip it out with a bucket. And they really have to work for it, and not everyone gets as much as they want. Here, I almost say we're spoiled. You go to the faucet, you turn it on, voila, you have water. And it's hard sometimes for people to understand that it is a commodity. It takes a lot of people, a lot of money to produce that safe drinking water, and the people have to pay for it. So I believe it's a commodity.
And if it's a commodity, has there ever been lethal accidents, and can there be lethal accidents when trying to drain water up from the ground?
Not that I'm aware of. There's pretty safe practices in trying to collect that water, and they're very careful about it because, of course, you don't want to contaminate the water. So I don't know of any lethal accidents that have occurred, at least that I know of.
Mm-hmm. Are we headed toward water privatization? So cutting off from a stream? Like, I have a stream near my house. Can I cut that off to make a pond and use that as my supplied drinking water, or is that called illegal for?
I don't believe you would be able to do that. A stream or a river is called a waters of the state. So you as a property owner don't necessarily have rights to do what you want with that water because it goes behind other people's homes as well, not just yours. And legally, it belongs to the state and everyone that lives in the state. So you as an individual would not be able to just block that water off and use it for yourself.
So, but are we headed toward that in any governmental way? And if so, can we prevent it or can we keep moving on with it? What are the pros and cons of that?
I think it's a possibility in heading that way. If you look at out west, like California, you were talking about, a lot of their water comes from a long ways away. The Rocky Mountains, they draw it in a long way. Las Vegas draws their water in a long way. So I think out there, they're probably in a different situation than we are, in that they do regulate it more, and I think they probably do enforce more rights on it to get it where they need it to go.
And if we can at all stop water privatization, would you do that? Would you have water privatization, and would you, or why wouldn't you? And in your opinion, how could you state that to any friends, family members to side with you?
That's a hard question. Because I think you want to create a situation where you can supply as many people as possible with water. And how do you do that if you privatize it? If you limit it to, like you said, if you block off a stream so that you can use that water, what are you doing to the people downstream? That's a difficult question to answer. I'm not sure if I have a good answer for you.
How much does an average citizen use in Jackson water-wise? So how many gallons do they use, and why do they use that much, and could you at all prevent that or go with it? Is it a sustainable amount, or is it just plain out ridiculous?
The average usage in Jackson is about 20,000 gallons for a regular size house every 3 months. That's not too outrageous. If it gets to the point where people are using too much water and we can't produce enough to keep up, we can either put on restrictions, like limit the amount of time they can sprinkle their lawn or wash their cars. Right now, we have plenty of capacity. We can produce just about anything that the current residents and businesses in Jackson need, but we are able to put restrictions on, and I think education goes a long way. You can educate your residents and your customers about conserving water, about putting new faucets in your house so they don't drip. A dripping faucet can waste over 1,000 gallons per day just going down the drain with no use.
A leaky faucet.
A leaky faucet, a leaky toilet, a hose that's left running outside could waste a lot of water. So those are things we try and teach our customers too, to watch out for and help us conserve the water that we do have.
Are we headed toward any era where there won't be enough water to supply ourselves in the future, say 10, 20 years?
I think in our area, in Michigan in particular, we are very lucky. There's an overabundance of water, but it will not be sustainable forever. I don't think you and I will ever see the day where we don't have enough water, but if we're not careful, it could occur in the future, yes.
Is there any way that we could completely just supply with California all the water they need in any place through the Great Lakes supply?
I don't think we could through the Great Lakes supplies. I think you would end up lowering the lake level so much that you could damage aquatic habitat, the fish habitat. There's shipping that occurs, and if you lower the water levels too much, the ships are so deep they wouldn't be able to float in the lakes. So I think you'd have a bigger impact than if you tried to supply the entire nation.
Are there any water rights issues facing Michigan today or in any time in the future? Are there any cases that have been brought to court recently through water rights?
The only one I can think of is that town in Wisconsin. I think they're in court right now trying to get water from us outside of the Great Lakes region. And it is a legal, there's legal documents, there's legal studies that have got the region to say, we need to maintain what we have before we start supplying to others, for that fear of giving away too much and then we're out of water as well.
Do you think that we are being selfish and that we could expand the territory through the Great Lakes region, or do you think we're not having enough and we need to lower it, or do you think we're just perfect where we are?
I think we're probably good where we are. It's probably a little bit on the conservative side of the equation, being more careful than more random. But I think technology is going to take us a long way too, because there's new technologies where you could remove salt from seawater as well.
I've seen that.
Yes, so that's another opportunity for areas out west that they may be able to get water from those bigger bodies.
And if their saltwater manufacturing becomes freshwater, it's extremely expensive as it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that cost could go down any?
I think it would. I think technology gets better the more you use it, and I think the more customers you get, you're able to supply it, and I think the cost would come down.
And I've had a few questions about that I've been thinking to myself. Space. How could we get enough water up there? I did my expedition on Mars, and I'm pretty interested how we're going to get so much water up there to supply them.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I haven't done that much study of the planets, but I do read articles about, they can see where it looks like there's water on Mars or there was water on the moon.
They've divided that up into sectors on Mars where there's more water here, so we should explore here, then expand out.
No kidding. Interesting. That would be a challenge to get enough water up there too. Do you transport it by rocket, by shuttle? And how many trips would you have to make to supply how many people? That would be an interesting concept.
Or would you try to if it was your decision, would you just put them on, have rocket supplements come up? Or would you try to make checkpoints half, quarter, so many miles, then halfway through you'd get to the International Space Station and keep moving?
That would be another option, wouldn't it? Get partway there and have more supply and then go on. Yeah.
And asteroids, could we get any water from those if we were to stop near an asteroid and start mining up water?
That's a good question. It's a possibility, isn't it? Because an asteroid is typically some part of a different planet, isn't it? So it's possible that they have underground water as well, like the Earth does. That would be interesting. I see you planning something here.
That's all for today. Thank you so much for answering my questions. It was such a pleasure. And
Thank you very much for having me, and you've really thought about this, and I appreciate your interest in water.
I hope you have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you.